Welcome to Don't Ask That Question. I'm Kelly O'Mara, and this week's format is going to be a little bit different. I don't have a guest this week. I just want to have a conversation about the Uvalde Robb Elementary School shooting investigation. Uh, this conversation is not about any kind of condemnation of the police response, but rather trying to get to the truth of the matter so that actually, we can get remedies and get them implemented. The fact that the all-encompassing legislation that was just passed on a federal level, without even having a final investigation, I find appalling. But that's what grandstanding and during crisis management looks like. So I'm not really surprised by it. It sort of happens after every major school shooting. It's no secret also that law enforcement's response was less than what was needed or required. From the beginning, almost immediately, inaccurate information was being disseminated to the public. For example, for days, timelines of the events were provided that were completely inaccurate. I was wondering from the beginning, why the timeline wasn't based on the cameras that I knew would be in the school and outside the school and businesses around the school, such as the funeral home. Surely that would provide a perfect timeline of what occurred, but more than a month went by before the school and funeral home and police body cams were even mentioned. So, that's the first question, why? Something along the lines of, let's wait and see what the video tells us before we make unsubstantiated claims and statements to the public. News reporting did not help the situation. Often reporters simply regurgitated what was fed to them without question. And in many cases, this still is happening today, and I'll get to that a little bit later. Clearly, something went terribly wrong as far as the response by law enforcement. But it's the information now that's being provided by the Texas Department of Public Safety that raises, more questions for me. Questions that I really would like some clarification on, and maybe you would too. Given the fact that the Texas Department of Public Safety has taken the lead in providing information to a special committee within the Texas legislature, one would think that all the I's were dotted and all the T's were crossed, but instead, the overview that was provided by Colonel McGraw of the DPS seems sort of amateurish, like the police response itself, frankly. I'm not trying to be critical of McGraw, but one would expect solid information given all the misinformation that we've received up to this point. So let's talk a little bit about what now appears to be the official investigation timeline of this horrific incident. I'm going to read this timeline. It's not the complete timeline because a lot of the timeline is just, more officers arrive, more officers arrive, more officers arrive. So I took out what I thought were, important pieces that led me to have more questions about what actually happened that day. So I'm going to read these. At 11:28:25, the suspect crashes grandmother's truck into the ravine. This is a huge ravine. If you've seen it, this isn't a small thing. This truck was really wrecked. So that's sort of interesting. I think McGraw said that the suspect had a tough time turning corners. He didn't have a driver's license at 18. So that's kind of an interesting statement. I'm not sure where he got it or how he found out that the suspect had trouble turning corners. Anyway, at 11:29:20, which is 1 minute later, a teacher makes the first call to 911, reporting a man with a gun. According to the DPS, Colonel McGraw, teachers quickly implemented active shooter protocols prior to the subject gaining entry into the school. So the school went into lockdown prior to his entry into the school. They did go through the protocols and did what they were supposed to do, lock the interior doors to the classrooms. Okay, so this is McGraw stating this. And this information, I think, becomes very important a little further down the timeline. So at 11:33, again, 40 seconds later, the suspect enters the school from the west door. 3 minutes later, at 11:35:55, 3 Uvalde Police Department officers with rifles enter the same door, the west door, the same door that the suspect had just entered 3 minutes earlier. 11:36, that's just seconds later. The chief of police for Uvalde, his name is Pete Arredondo. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, Arredondo, enters the building. At this point, there are numerous police officers in the building with numerous weapons. Okay, so virtually, 6 minutes. I think it's even before then, maybe 4 minutes. So at 11:38:37, this is the first oddity as far as conversation. And again, this information is provided by the Texas Department of Public Safety. An unknown officer says he's contained in the office. That's a quote. That's odd. He's contained in the office. He's contained in the office. We're assuming he's talking about the suspect. Okay, but the office? We'll get into that later. It's clear, though, from everybody that's in the building, there's a lot of law enforcement in the building at this point. Yet this guy says he's contained in the office. Yet these other law enforcement people are near the classroom. They know he's in a classroom. So if police are congregating near a classroom and this police officer 6 minutes in says, we've got him contained in the office, that should be clarified. It just seems odd. In fact, at 11:41, a Uvalde police officer says, quote, "We believe that he is barricaded in one of the offices. They're still shooting." 11:41, so that's 11 minutes, and the school is full of law enforcement at this point. It doesn't make sense that one of the officers would say he is barricaded in one of the offices. Okay, not a big deal at this point. But there is a big difference between an office, a school office, and a school classroom. And that would be important information that other law enforcement who are coming into the building would need to know. I mean, if they're saying that the suspect is, holed up in an office, then they're going to the wrong place, right? I mean, that's what it says to me. And again, I could be looking too deeply into this, but I find the office reports very bizarre. So at 11:41:30, okay, it is known that a hooligan, which is a bar that law enforcement and fire departments use to basically break door jams so that you can, get into a door that's locked, that a hooligan is available, okay, at 11:41. At 11:50, we learned that Chief Arredondo is in charge. So the Uvalde chief of police is in charge of what's going on at the school at that point. A minute later, at 11:51, the Border Patrol agents enter the west door. And again, the west door is the same door that the suspect came in, other police officers came in. To my understanding, there are no offices between the west door and the classrooms. That is a hall of classrooms. So again, I'm wondering where these other two police officers came up with the office. So we have the Border Patrol now, focused on the room where the suspect is doing the shooting. At 12:09, the school now is full of Uvalde police, Border Patrol, Department of Public Safety officers, and they're all armed, all of them. At 12:09:04, the Department of Public Safety officer says, quote, "Go around and get the master key to the rooms," unquote. Okay, so this is the first time we hear somebody asking for keys to get into the rooms, which is interesting. The first time that someone, and it wasn't, this is interesting because it wasn't the Uvalde chief of police, Arredondo, who was asking for those keys. Of course, Colonel McGraw, who of the DPS, who is providing this information to the state legislature, he doesn't provide the name of the officer, nor does he specify what door the DPS officer is wanting to open. And I think that's important. You know, if you're going to provide the legislature with a timeline of everything that happened, you know, it might be nice to say why. Why did he ask for keys? And did he need it for, well, what door? Certainly he spoke to this officer. He knows who this officer is. At 12:11, 2 minutes later, the chief of police of Uvalde, who's, you know, in control of the scene, he requests a master key. Which, again, this is leading me to believe that they need a key to get into a door, some door somewhere. And we're assuming that it's the key to the room where the shooter is, right? Again, McGraw does not provide any explanation about this. He just says, oh, this is what happened at this exact time. You know, the chief of Uvalde police asked for a key. So at 12:28, chief of Uvalde police, Arredondo, again says, quote, "I am going to get some more keys to test," unquote. So again, we're assuming that Arredondo has tried some keys that don't work because he's now asking for some more keys. But Colonel McGraw of the DPS doesn't provide any detail here. So it's hard to know what door Arredondo was trying to get into. Now, let's preface all this with Chief Arredondo is no longer speaking. He's not talking to anybody. He, I'm sure, lawyered up like everybody else, and you know, he'll wait until he absolutely has to explain. But for the benefit of the legislature, who's going to, you know, decide how we can fix these problems, it would have been nice to know more information here, so that they have it and can make their decisions based on accurate information. So at 12:28, again, like 40 seconds later, again, Chief of Uvalde Police, Arredondo, says, quote, "We have master keys and they're not working," unquote. We have master keys and they're not working. What room is he trying to get into? I mean, this is this is important information, and you know, I'll discuss that a little bit later. But it would have been nice if Colonel McGraw of DPS, who, by the way, you know, oversees the Department of Public Safety, including school safety for the state of Texas. So it would have been nice, for the benefit of the legislature, forget the public, but just for the legislature, to give them specific information. We have master keys and they're not working, says the Uvalde police chief, right? Where aren't they working? Anyway, he doesn't provide that information. So at 12:30, like 2 minutes later, actually 1 minute later, Chief of Uvalde Police Arredondo says, and again, I'm quoting, "Okay, we've cleared out everything except for that room. But we're ready to breach, but the door is locked," unquote. So he's cleared out all the rooms in the school. This is what I'm taking from this, okay? All the rooms are cleared except that one room. We assume that it's classroom 111. But again, Colonel McGraw of DPS, He doesn't specify that. Why not? Because then we'd know that Arredondo is at room 111 and 12. They're right next to each other. The doors are separated by maybe a foot of wall, and there's the handles. So we're assuming at this point that Arredondo is at rooms 111 and 112. Well, we can assume all day, but it would have been nice if Colonel McGraw would have specified that, because, none of the keys are working. That door is locked. That is what the chief of police is saying. In fact, he's been saying it now for 20 minutes, that the door is locked. We need the keys. Okay. So then we get to 12, 35, and 39. This is nearly an hour after the gunfire began. A hooligan is brought in through the west door. Again, through the west door, the door that the suspect came in through, and all the police. They couldn't have gone down that hallway without passing room 111 and 112. It would have been on their right-hand side if they came in through the west door. And anyway, so it makes me wonder how many police are actually surrounding these doors, right? I mean, clearly it wasn't just Arredondo. He wasn't the only guy standing there. The school is full of police. The Border Patrol is there. Uvalde police are there. DPS police are there. So here we go at 11:42, 7 minutes after they bring in the hooligan to, break the door jamb, which they could have, right? He says, quote, "We're having a effing problem getting into the room because it's locked," unquote. So this is 5 statements about the room being locked. And the keys don't work. So at 12:43:20, oh, and by the way, the hooligan is there. They brought it in through the west door. It's there. It's ready to be used. At 12:43:20, yet again, okay, this is less than a minute later, Chief Arredondo says, quote, "They got to get that effing door open, bro. They can't get that door open. We need more keys or something," unquote. Okay. I'm not sure why Colonel McGraw of DPS didn't provide more specific information about which door. Okay, there's no conversation in his timeline about which door. We're all assuming it's 111 because that's the door that needs to be breached. But he doesn't write it in his timeline. So it's really confusing. I mean, I could say right now, I bet my life on it, it was room 111, but it would have been nice if the man who was chosen to provide information to the state legislature would have given more specific information. So it ends up at 12:47:57. He ends his timeline with sledgehammer enters from east hallway. Room was breached. A sledgehammer. A sledgehammer for what? What room? What room did they need a sledgehammer for? Again, he doesn't, Colonel McGraw doesn't provide the room number that they need a sledgehammer for. And again, we're all assuming it's 111 because the room was then breached. 111 was breached. Did they use the sledgehammer to open the door? Colonel McGraw doesn't say. It's not in his timeline. He just says sledgehammer enters from east hallway. Well, did they use it or did they not use a sledgehammer to get into 111? Why wouldn't he provide this information? It's important information for numerous reasons, and I'll get into that. So according to Colonel McGraw, the outside door lock, the west side door, the outside door to the school, the lock was functioning correctly, but it was unlocked. So did somebody lock the door? Have they asked that question? You know, these are supposed to be self-locking doors when they're shut. So, when somebody's on the outside, they can't get in. And we know that the teacher who called 911, the first person to call 911 was the teacher who had just come through the west door herself. Remember, she had a rock in it, but she moved the rock, door closed. She assumed it locked. It doesn't make sense that the door lock on the outside wasn't working, right? But a locksmith says, no, the lock was good. Okay, so I'd like a demonstration, frankly, of how the outside doors are locked and how a working lock won't lock. I really would like to see that. But again, that's just me. And it's important because this is how the suspect got in the school during lockdown. The school went into lockdown before he even entered the school. Why? Because he was shooting outside the school. The teacher saw it, reported it, and they immediately, according to Colonel McGraw, they immediately went into their lockdown protocols. Okay. So then McGraw also states during his presentation to the state legislature special committee that the classroom doors can't be locked from inside. The teacher has to come out of the classroom and lock the door with a key. It seems almost dangerous, especially in this situation. How quickly can she get in her purse or desk or wherever she keeps the key, get the kids in their hiding places, their safe space, away from the window, whatever the protocol is, get outside the door, lock it, and then get back in the door before the shooter gets there. I mean, these are weird locks. It's a weird process. But anyway, we're assuming that's what this teacher did. And she went out and locked the door and went back in the classroom and thought she was safe. So McGraw advises lawmakers that, quote, we had a locksmith inspect the lock and the lock was functioning, but the strike plate was not. So the strike plate is that little flat plate that's on the opposite side of the lock. There's like a little square hole and the lock fits in there, and the strike plate is around it. It usually has two, Phillips head screws in it. And, if it gets loose, you just use a screwdriver and you tighten them up and it works. I mean, the hole is still there. The little lock button, I don't even know what it's called, will fit in that hole, right? It's just that the plate is loose. So I'm trying to figure out how the lock didn't work just because the plate was loose. But nevertheless, he then says that the teacher in room 11, okay, reported that the lock was broken. Now, he doesn't say room 11. He just says that the teacher reported that it was broken. And so, he used a photograph of two classroom doors that weren't the classrooms. They weren't 111 and 112. They were, I think, 125 and 126. Anyway, it was hard to see the numbers. But you can see that clear was written on each door. So those rooms were cleared of children, people, whatever, during the siege, the breach. So he's saying that, the teacher told administration that the lock was broken much earlier. And so somebody actually in the legislature wanted to know when, and, I'm not sure, I'll have to, get that documentation and get back to you. Well, that's important documentation for several reasons, okay? And we'll get into that a little bit later. So if he wanted to show us doors Okay, classroom doors that reflected what 111 and 112 looked like. Why didn't you just show us the doors? I mean, again, I don't want to see the horrific event inside, okay? But it would have been nice to see the door of 111, to see if a sledgehammer, broke the lock, broke the handle to get in, and that's how they got in. Because so far we don't know how they got in, but we have that's we have information on that too. So if a sledgehammer was used to open 111, wouldn't one think that would make it difficult for a locksmith to know whether or not the lock was working or not? I mean, I'm assuming they smashed it. And I don't know. Is that why we didn't get to see room 111's door? Again, these are questions that if I were sitting on the legislature, I would have asked. Okay. So here's what we need to know. So, basically that's the base information. And so I'm just going to kind of wrap up and kind of go into what bothers me about all of this, least of which is the lack of clarity about these issues. Okay. It wouldn't have been difficult for Colonel McGraw to provide more specific information. So my question is, was the lock on room 111 broken? In other words, was the door open? Because the lock didn't lock. If it was just a strike plate, out of alignment, why wasn't that fixed? Because Colonel McGraw said she reported to somebody at school that it was broken. Why wasn't that fixed? I don't know anybody who hasn't tightened, a strike plate with a Phillips screwdriver. They get loose. The school janitor could have done that. You didn't have to have a locksmith come out. Was it reported, this broken door, this broken lock, was it reported to the administration? The principal, knows about it, and they reported it up the line. And I assume everything ends up at DPS because they oversee public safety in the schools. I don't know. Colonel McGraw didn't provide any information. When they have lockdowns, and by the way, they have lockdowns practices all the time. In fact, I went on Facebook and I saw a March 9th practice lockdown for Robb Elementary School. That was just 2 months prior to an actual lockdown. So did she tell them 2 months ago that, hey, my door's not locking, and they just blew her off? I don't know. Again, this is not tough to find out. Colonel McGraw could have asked these questions. He had plenty of time. Furthermore, I'm not convinced, and again, I guess I'd have to, talk to a locksmith or, somebody who runs a large building and has, lots of doors. Do strike plates actually stop a door from locking? I mean, a loose one, I can still close doors if they're loose. I don't understand. So I'd like a little more clarification on that. Bottom line is, we need to know whether room 111 was locked or whether it was open. Colonel McGraw made a statement that he believed that nobody ever tried to open the door to room 111. And I find that bizarre, but I get ahead of myself. So there are several explanations of room 111's door. Forget the outside door, how he got in. I still question that. But 111 is very, very interesting. Did police use a key to get in, or did they use a sledgehammer to gain entry into 111 and breach the room? Furthermore, I'd like to know, did the shooter kill or wound anyone in classroom 112? Could he gain access to room 112? did law enforcement have to use a key to get into 112? Because they're connected. These two rooms are connected. In the middle, there's a door in between these two rooms inside the classrooms that they can freely go back and forth. So according to Texas DPS timeline, oh no, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. So according to the newspaper, the Texas Tribune, Chief Arredondo testified in a closed session to the House committee that the doors to the adjoining classrooms, 111 and 112, containing the shooter, were locked, okay? He's saying to them, those doors were locked. So my question then is, okay, so the outside doors are locked. Was the classroom door that connected 111 and 112, was that locked too? Doesn't make sense, because that means one teacher could lock the side and the other teacher couldn't unlock. I mean, I don't know. I'm just curious. Was the middle door between the two rooms, was that locked? So knowing that the lock on classroom 111 wasn't working. Now, again, this is according to DPS Colonel McGraw. Why wasn't, I won't say why, but was the teacher instructed when she reported that her lock wasn't working, you know, prior to the real shooting incident? When she reported that, was she given any instructions to move the children into classroom 112? I mean, that seems like the logical fix. If her door isn't locking and they go into lockdown, she has a middle door. She can go, hey, kids, go into 112. Was she instructed to do that? Or did they just not say anything to her, not fix the door, and sort of you're on your own? I mean, I don't know. But the option of having her take her kids into room 112 certainly was available. Okay, so they have practiced this numerous times. And like I said, the last time that I saw was a Facebook post on March 9th. They had a practice lockdown at Robb Elementary School. So there are two scenarios being played out that we need clarification on. First, it's difficult to understand. I just can't get my arms around it, why the chief of police, Pete Arredondo, would repeatedly claim that he needed keys to get into room 111 if he actually didn't need them. Because remember, Colonel McGraw is saying nobody tried to open the door. I just find it, I don't know. I can't even imagine why somebody would continually make these statements during a shooting incident if it wasn't real, if it really didn't happen. Moreover, there were lots of other law enforcement officers very near Arredondo during the standoff in that hallway of classrooms 111 and 112. What did they see? Did they see Arredondo try the door handle? Did he try the door handle? Did they see him try various keys that weren't working? This isn't a tough question. They know who was there. Arredondo knows who was there. Just ask him, because Colonel McGraw is saying nobody tried to open that door. It doesn't make sense that the chief of police of Uvalde would just continually lie about something when he knows there are cameras in the hallway, body cameras on the cops, you know, eyewitnesses. These people are eyewitnesses. They're there. They're seeing what he's doing. So it gets even stranger, because the accounts of how the room 111 was breached are also conflicting. And so let me read these to you. This is interesting. ABC News reports the following, quote, Officers from the Border Patrol Tactical Unit breached the classroom door using a set of keys acquired from a school janitor, unquote. Really? Okay. That sounds to me like the door won't open. It sounds like the door is locked, right? But let's move on. The Texas Tribune reports, quote, by then, a long-awaited working key had been found. Officers inserted it into the door of room 111, and a tactical unit from the Border Patrol stormed in, unquote. Okay, that's two reports that they had a key to get in that door, a key. So, and then there's Colonel McGraw, who says at 12:47:57, sledgehammer enters from the east hallway. 12:50, breach and termination gunfire. Well, again, that tells me that the sledgehammer got him in. So who's to say? Were the keys found that worked, and that's how the classroom 111 was breached? If so, then Chief of Police Arredondo appears to be telling the truth. If a sledgehammer was used, then it appears that Arredondo still was telling the truth. Or why wouldn't Border Patrol, the tactical team, just use the handle to open the door? How about we ask the Border Patrol? Hey, Colonel McGraw, ask the Border Patrol, how did you breach the room? Tell us. Better still, where did these news people get this information that they got the keys? Where did they get that information? Did they go to the same hearing as everybody else? Did they see the same evidence? How come Colonel McGraw keeps saying the door was open when the reporting of it says they used keys or a sledgehammer? It's making me crazy. So, so again, if those two scenarios are what played out, they used keys or a sledgehammer, Chief of Police Arredondo, you know, he was right. He's been honest throughout this siege as far as what he needed and what he was saying he needed to get into the room. So why isn't Colonel McGraw being specific about how the room was breached? I mean, this is a guy who stood up and told us that the suspect didn't know how to make turns, that he didn't have a driver's license and he didn't know how to make turns, and that's why he crashed. That's pretty specific information. I mean, where did he get that? He hasn't talked to the grandmother. He openly admitted it. The kid doesn't have a driver's license. Who told him that the kid can't make turns? I don't know. But you would think if he's got that kind of detail, he could tell us how they breached the room. So it's been weeks of misinformation. Now, Colonel McGraw has the opportunity to clear up all this misinformation. And frankly, I think he dropped the ball again. Why? Further, does anyone find it odd that there have been numerous lockdown drills at Robb Elementary School prior to this real deal, and no one at the school thought it was important to have the teacher's unlockable door repaired? I mean, does that make sense to anybody? Colonel McGraw made a point of saying that she reported that, to the administration. And they had all these, these practice lockdowns, and her door's broken. Well, that doesn't sound very safe. And Colonel McGraw is the head of public safety for these schools. I don't know. Does the information go up? I mean, I'm curious. When all these schools have these lockdown practices, is there some kind of report that's generated and sent up the line so that, Colonel McGraw, who oversees all this, can go, wow, they're really on top of it. Everything goes smooth. Or is it just, oh, hey, my door doesn't work. Okay, we'll get right on that. And then they don't. I don't know. That sounds like a safety issue to me. Nevertheless, it bothers me that this appeared to fall on deaf ears. If what Colonel McGraw is saying is true, because Colonel McGraw is the one that's saying he doesn't believe anybody tried to open the door. But he also doesn't provide any evidence for that statement. In other words, is there a video shot showing everybody around rooms 111 and 112 not trying to open the door? Is there? Is there eyewitness accounts that nobody tried to open the door? That Arredondo was lying the whole time? Because if Arredondo's trying to open the door, it sounds to me like it's locked. It sounds to me like he can't get in. I don't know. And this is why I want some clarification. So anyway, my other question is, how many other classrooms at Robb Elementary had broken doors, where the locks didn't work? Do we have a count on that? Can Colonel McGraw find out how many keys, how many doors had to be opened with keys and how many just, were open? I mean, what a coincidence it would be that this suspect went through the door that was unlocked and then got into a classroom door that was unlocked, and none of the other doors had a problem with their locks. I mean, what are the odds? What are the odds? I don't know. I got a problem with this. So Colonel McGraw, as head of the Texas State Department of Public Safety, which school safety falls under his responsibilities, was he alerted to the fact at all, ever, that Robb Elementary School had locked door problems? I'd like to know. Okay. I mean, he's the guy that now is in control before the legislature, telling them, this is what happened and we need to fix it. So where is his responsibility? Where does his responsibility lie in all of this? I know he talked about, kids online knew what he was going to do, and, we weren't notified, police weren't notified, blah, blah. Well, if you knew that there were doors in that school that weren't locking, if you were told, then why weren't they fixed? Or if you weren't told, why? This seems like really, really important information, because lockdowns are useless unless the doors lock. Now, could the suspect have gotten in anyway? Absolutely. There were windows next to the outside door. Beep, 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 beep. You shoot the glass, you reach in, you open the door. That's how you get entry into the building. Okay, I have no doubt he would have entered the building anyway. The classroom door is a different thing. It had an outside lock. So teachers had to lock it, weird, then go back in. So the door is locked from the outside. Yes, there's a little window. He could have, shot through that little window, but he couldn't have fit through the little window, right? So it's important that the locks work. So I wonder what the reporting system is among Texas schools when they practice lockdowns. Is there any accountability? Does anybody care whether the doors work or not, whether the locks work or not? Is that information passed up the line, and, so that Colonel McGraw can go in and go, hey, you got to get that fixed immediately? I don't know. But I wish he would have told us that. I wish he would have given us that information, that kind of detail. So right now, we have no idea whether the teacher really reported this to the administration or not, because Colonel McGraw didn't give us a date, a time, when she found out, who she reported it to, who they reported it to. He just said it. Yeah, he just said it. But again, this leads to this continual misinformation. So, and no clarity. We have no idea what the truth is at this point. So anyway, I also find it interesting that McGraw has said that, they brought in a locksmith, you know, and the locksmith said that the lock was working. But if it was working, how did it fail to lock? Okay, this is the outside door, the west outside door. How did it fail to lock? Just a coincidence? It just didn't work that time. I don't know. I mean, stranger things have happened, I'm sure, but it just seems kind of weird. So these issues may seem minor, but they aren't. Knowing whether the door to classroom 111 was locked must be answered completely with detailed information. Why? I'll tell you. If the door to classroom 111 was locked, right? How did he get entry? If it was locked, how did he enter that classroom? Okay. 2, if the door to classroom 111 wasn't locked, right? It was open. Why would Chief of Police Pete Arredondo continually lie about the difficulties he was having getting access to that room? I mean, think of it. In the heat of the moment, tempers are rising, there's stress and tension, and they're thinking about these poor kids in the room. And this guy, he's saying the keys don't work repeatedly. Why would he lie about that? I mean, I can't even think that in that kind of a situation that I could lie. You're in the moment, you're in the situation, you're telling people what's really happening. 3, if the door to classroom 111 was unlocked, which Colonel McGraw intimates that he doesn't believe anybody tried to open the door. Okay. Why are there reports that the border patrol, the tactical team that breached the room, the border patrol, used keys to gain access? I mean, how hard is this? Ask them. Ask the border patrol. Is the door broken? Is the handle broken? Or, did you just open the door and went in? Or did you use a key? Come on, Colonel McGraw, we deserve better. I want this information. I want to know how they breached that room. Number 4, if the door to classroom 111 was unlocked, why would Colonel McGraw state that the room was breached with a sledgehammer? I mean, because that's basically on his timeline. That's what he's saying. They brought in a sledgehammer, room was breached. It sounds like it was locked. I don't get it. Where is his proof that nobody tried to open this door? Where is the camera proof? Where is the video? Now, I know this video apparently was like a fisheye. So it's a warped kind of view down the hallway. And these hallways, the way the classrooms are situated is like, okay, you walk like 20 feet, and then there's like a 3-foot by maybe 8 or 9 foot, 10-foot enclave, right? So the door's set back like 3 feet into the wall. And rooms 111 and 112 were further down the hall from the fisheye. So I would imagine it would be very tough for that fisheye to get around that 3-foot corner to tape what anybody was doing in there, right? So I'd like to see the video. Show us the video, Johnny. Let us see if anybody tried to open the door. And if Colonel McGraw can't see that, then he can't make that statement. If he doesn't have eyewitnesses of police officers, law enforcement officers who were standing there with Police Chief Arredondo, and if they're saying the door was locked, why is Colonel McGraw saying, I don't believe anybody tried to open the door? I don't know. This is why I want some clarity. Finally, you know, I did email, I tried calling, no answer. And I guess they're busy, I get it. But I emailed the media office of the Texas Department of Public Safety. And I asked them specifically, just one question. How was room 111 of Robb Elementary School breached? I haven't gotten a reply. I'm hoping I will, because I really want to know. So at the end of the day, Colonel McGraw, his job was to provide accurate information about the events of that day as he knew it. In my opinion, his investigation and timeline still have gaping holes. These questions need to be answered. I get it. Yes, a written investigation will be provided when the investigation is completed. I've read a lot of them. Okay, I've been following school shootings since Columbine. I've read a lot of these investigations, and they're all a little screwy, frankly. You can go through them and find all kinds of errors in these investigations. So I can wait for that. But it just doesn't make sense that McGraw had the opportunity to provide clarity to the Texas legislature and the public, and he didn't. I mean, it's like, do we need you? Do we need to help you ask the questions? So that we don't have to, sit here and wonder about filling in the blanks. It just doesn't make sense. I also found it amusing that if you watch McGraw's presentation to the Texas legislature, the special committee, it's on YouTube. They're hearing, these lawmakers, they're hearing and seeing the same thing that I am. I'm watching it just like they are. I'm listening. I'm looking at all the, the pictures and the diagrams and the timeline. And I'm listening to what McGraw's saying. So I'm wondering how it's possible that not one lawmaker thought to ask any of these questions. Like, well, how'd they get in the room? I mean, were they listening? Anyway, so that befuddles me. I mean, I can tell you, if I was sitting there and I was one of those lawmakers, I would have had this list going, yeah, but how did you breach the room? How do you know 111 was open? That it wasn't locked, because you're not providing any evidence for that. You're just right over their head. Whatever. But that's troublesome, because these are the same people who are gonna, make the fixes. They're gonna pass legislation, and we're gonna do all these things to make this right, and it's never gonna happen again. Well, if they're not listening and they don't understand what's being said to them, then they're not going to fix anything. And they certainly didn't get the answers that they needed that day. So I wonder, these are my thoughts on what we've been provided by, the official report so far. If any of you can tell me, an answer to this, if you've read it somewhere, or, that's official, please, after you watch the show, send me an email. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this. So far, as far as I'm concerned, we don't really know exactly what happened in that school that day. And until they can provide some clarification, which is as simple as asking people, they just, McGraw can go tomorrow and ask those people who were there in that hallway around room 111 and 112, and ask them, did you see, Peter Arredondo, the chief of police of Uvalde, did you see him try to open the door? Did he ever stick keys in that door to see if it would open? I mean, investigation 101, just ask them and let us know. Anyway, so those are my thoughts so far. I wonder what else will come out. Maybe I will get an email back from the DPS telling me how room 111 was breached. I'll update you if I do. But I wouldn't hold your breath. I'm not. Anyway, so I want to thank you all for watching. I'm very interested if you all have comments about this review, and you can leave me a message on the BitChute site, or you can go to my website, Don't Ask That Question with kellyo'mara.com. And again, if you're so inclined, please leave a donation. It's much appreciated. And thank you. I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.